Good evening. I just can't resist the podium with the flags. It all feels so presidential, doesn't it, really? And I'll come back to that in a moment, because it's very odd that our general elections have become increasingly presidential. You see, in theory, we vote for a man or woman to represent us in a constituency. But actually, increasingly we vote, do we like the Labour leader? Do we dislike the Labour leader? Have we identified whether this Labour leader has a personality? Which would be very unlikely. My name is Nigel FARAGE. You probably know me. I'm famous for I'm a celebrity, get me out of here! Anybody here have a fear of snakes? Hands up. Many of you in this room are not telling the truth to yourselves or to me. I have the most enormous fear of snakes, and the idea, you said to me a year ago that I'd be strapped down on the ground, 8 feet under, with 20 snakes crawling over me. I'd have said you wanted your heads tested, but I did it, and that was fun. My career was working in the City of London, back in the 1980s and 90s, when life used to be fun. There was no wokery. Steve there was with me. There was no wokery, there was no political correctness. We very often didn't go back to work after lunch. And life was great. And I did that, and I got into politics, and I was a member of the Conservative Party. I joined the Conservative Party in my teens. I thought the Thatcher Revolution was very necessary, painful, but very necessary. And it was in the early 90s when I realised that we were being designed to join what became the euro. I said, well, if you haven't got your own currency, you don't control your own interest rates, you're not really a sovereign country. And that motivated me to get involved in politics. And I campaigned for us to leave the European club, the European political union. Now, I'm not anti-Europe at all, far from it. I think Europe's a fantastic place to visit. I like their wine, I like their women, I'm all in favour of Europe. But as an alliance, as a friendship, not as a political union. My campaign for us to leave the European Union took me 27 years. 27 years, in some ways, of madness, because I'd given up a hell of a lot to do it. I had a good career, I was earning big money, my golf handicap was 4. Not bad, is it? By the way, tennis, I can't claim, James, to be any blooming good at tennis. But I've got a friend who's a very, very good tennis player. His name is Djokovic. And he's given me, he's very optimistic, I do have tickets for July the 14th to the men's final, courtesy of the Djokovic family. I hope lots of you are really, really jealous of that. Well, actually, if James buys me a drink afterwards, I might think about it. You never know.
Right, you're in.
So I got involved in politics not for a career, the opposite. Actually, it damaged me in many ways. But I had this absolute burning conviction that we ought to be a self-governing nation. And I believe that totally and utterly. And 2 weeks after D-Day, it seems to me that the massive sacrifices that those that went before us were for us and the rest of Europe to be free, independent, democratic countries. So I'm a very resolute character. Not everyone likes what I have to say, but I always say what I think. I never hold back. And you can agree with me, you can disagree with me. I don't really care. I don't say things to court popularity. I say things because I believe them to be true. And I think in a free, civilized society, we should be able to do that without being cancelled, without having milkshakes thrown in our face by a young OnlyFans model from Clacton. I suspect she was upset that in the previous week I'd unsubscribed from her channel. I do hope this meeting is not being recorded on mobile phones. But then again, do you know what? Even if it is, I couldn't care less. I couldn't care less. You can say what you like about me, you can be as rude as you want about me, you can draw cartoons about me, I simply don't care. I just know what I believe in. I know what I stand for. And I'm prepared to fight. And I fought the European Union for all those years. 20 years of it in the European Parliament. And my first colleague in the European Parliament, a man named Geoffrey Titford, lived, of course, on 2nd Avenue, Frinton. And that was when I first started to visit this area. And the beach hut, which my kids... By the way, the beach here is amazing, isn't it? Yeah. The beach here is amazing, and you haven't got crazy parking charges. Very, very sensible indeed. So I fought the European Union and won. I fought the UK political establishment and won. Mr. Cameron, in the end, having to give in and give us a referendum. And in more recent times, I fought the banks. The banks that tried to close me down last year, well, the banks that did close me down last year, and I fought hard against them. I'm not frightened of anybody, I'm not frightened of anything. I've had a major road traffic accident, I had cancer as a young man, I survived a major plane crash back in 2010. I'm not frightened of anything. I'm a fighter, I'm a warrior, that's who I am. And some people like it, and some people don't, but that's who I am. Now that night on the 31st of January 2020, we were in Parliament Square, there were 100,000 of us, counting down to the moment at which we left the European Union. And it was my honour to have the microphone to count down. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Push. We left the European Union. And I thought, that's it, I'm done. I've done my job. I came into politics to achieve one thing. We've done it. I won't be needed anymore. So I joined LBC Radio. I did phone-ins, a bit like old Max over here, you know. And radio's a great medium. It's a great medium, it's a wonderful thing to do. But then they made an absolute mess of it. Mrs. May made a total mess of it. So I came back and formed the Brexit Party. And we won the European elections of that year, getting double the number of votes of any other party. And before the final vote, Theresa May resigned as Prime Minister, which I took to be a pretty good scalp. Along came Boris, a highly entertaining figure that I'd known socially for 30 years. He still owes me that tenner, but that's just where it is. And the general election came along in 2019, and I stood aside. I stood aside here in this constituency, I stood aside in over half the country to help Boris reach a massive majority, which he did, with an 80-seat majority. So for the second time, I retired from politics and joined a new startup company called GB News, where I've had a show 4 nights a week for the last 3 years. Definitely the best job I've ever had in my life. I get to look at a TV screen, say what I think, have what guests I want to have on for an hour, and the ratings have gone through the roof. In fact, some nights we get more viewers live than Sky News, the BBC News Channel, and Talk TV added up together. It's been an amazing job. It's been the best paid job, I say that unashamedly, the best paid job I've ever had in my life. I've loved it. So why, you might ask, have I now once again, come out of retirement and throw myself back into the frontline lunacy that is politics. Because, folks, I feel completely betrayed by a Conservative Party that I helped to get their biggest majority in 40 years. They don't know what they are anymore. Look at today's newspapers. Suella Braverman is virtually proposing marriage to me in public. No, I'm not, completely against. No, sorry. But then in a rival newspaper, David Cameron is being openly abusive about me and says I have no place within the Conservative movement in this country, that what I talk about is dog whistle, that somehow I'm the most appalling rabble-rouser. He's really saying that I'm far right. Lord Cameron, and by the way, isn't it good to see David Cameron back in frontline politics? Oh, I'm so surprised. David Cameron, wholly unconcerned with the breach of promise. So why did we vote Brexit? Why did we vote for the biggest constitutional change, maybe upheaval, depending on your point of view, for perhaps 300 years? We did it because we wanted to be a self-governing nation. But the issue that changed everything was that of net migration, was that of the sheer number of people coming into our country. That is why we voted Brexit. That is why we voted in 2019, with my help, to give the Conservatives an 80-seat majority. And some people think we shouldn't discuss it. It's not quite right in polite society to discuss these things. Let me give you some context. In 1948, Windrush sailed for the West Indies, right? We all know that. We felt that we owed what we now call the Commonwealth countries a debt of honour. And do you know what we did? Because in 2 world wars, 40% of the total contribution made on land, on sea, and in the air, 40% came from the Empire. And not one of them was conscripted. They all volunteered. Whether in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Jamaica, Nigeria, they all volunteered. And we felt after what they'd given, we owed something. So we began a policy of managed immigration into Britain. And through the end of the 1940s, and for the whole of the 1950s, and for the whole of the 1960s, and for the whole of the 1970s, and for the whole of the 1990s, until, who remembers, things can only get better. Yep, until Blair, through that half-century period, net migration into Britain ran at between 30 and 40,000 people a year, all right? And I would argue 25 years ago, we had the best integration of immigrants into a country of any country in Europe. It's something actually we were incredibly proud of. Then we get New Labour. And Tony decides to open the doors in a way we'd never, ever seen. And over the course of those Blair years, into the last 18 months of the rather feeble Gordon Brown, 2.7 million people net came into our country. I mean, literally an unimaginable number of people. But it's okay, because in 2010, Call Me Dave became our Prime Minister. Call Me Dave. Eton, Oxford, Call Me Dave. There we are. They promised in that manifesto they would reduce net migration to tens of thousands a year, yeah? To take us back to where we'd always been. Something that worked, was manageable, reasonable, didn't affect the lives of too many people. They failed. In 2015, they got re-elected with a promise to reduce net migration to tens of thousands a year. They failed, but it's okay. Because in 2017, they were re-elected with a promise to reduce net migration to tens of thousands a year. And then in 2019, they won a massive majority with my help, with a promise to massively reduce migration into Britain. Since the Conservatives have held power in 2010, net 4.3 million more people have come. Gross, 2.5 million have come in the last 2 years alone. 1 in every 30 human beings living in this country has come in the last 2 years. I am not making a comment. I'm not saying people coming from overseas are bad. Far from it. All of us have friends that have come into Britain from all over the world. And the vast majority are very, very good, hard-working, law-abiding, decent people. But a population explosion on that level is unmanageable for all of us. Is it any wonder that rents have risen between 20 and 30%, depending where you live, since 2021? Is it any wonder that our kids and grandkids cannot even begin to think of getting a foot on the housing ladder, cannot begin to think of doing things that we've done, and our parents and grandparents could do actually relatively comfortably? Is it any wonder we can't get a GP appointment? Is it any wonder that our roads have become almost impossible to drive on at certain parts of the day, and that our infrastructure is crumbling? The biggest single problem we face is the population explosion. But we're told it's okay, because it's making us richer. Well, this argument is about GDP, the size of the national cake. Well, if you have more people living here, it's not surprising the economy grows. But does the individual get richer? GDP per capita has now fallen for the last 6 quarters in a row. The average Briton has got poorer for the last 18 months, and that has coincided with record numbers of people coming. The arguments, folks, I'm making are not based on prejudice. They're not based on being against anybody. They're based on plain common sense. And if we carry on this way, we will, I'm afraid, our quality of life will diminish. I've been involved in the last 2 leaders' debates, one on the BBC and one on ITV. Anyone watch them? Yes. Well, I say debates. I mean, more like a cat fight, actually, going on between Angela Rayner and Penny Mordaunt. But all those issues they argue about are all directly linked to the population explosion. I am saying this needs to be the immigration election. We need to get this right. We need to get back a sense of balance. Privately, they all know it. They just haven't got the guts to talk about it in public. And this is why I've come out of retirement. I've come out of retirement because I feel betrayed by a Conservative Party that I backed in 2019. I've come out of retirement because I'm fearful of what a Starmer government will do. I suspect everything will actually get worse than it is right now. But we cannot reward 4 consecutive manifestos that haven't told us the truth. And why should we believe them on a 5th? So this is what I put to you. Labour have won this election already, whether you like that in FRINTON or not. It's done. It's done. 25% of 2019 Conservative voters want to see them get 0 seats. That's what betrayal does. The question I'm putting to you is who is fit and capable of leading the opposition voice in Parliament and in the country over the course of the next 5 years of what I'm convinced will be a failing Labour government. I don't see any talent on the front benches whatsoever. I mean, Angela Rayner. Well, I'll tell you what, it'd be quite fun going for a drink with her, wouldn't it? But I mean, at least she's got personality. Starmer's got none. This current Conservative Party cannot form an effective opposition if 2 of their leading players in today's newspapers can't make their minds up whether I'm a good egg or a bad egg. They're split down the middle. And I believe that there is a majority for common sense in this country. It still exists. And I'm prepared to fight for what I see as British values. It's unfashionable to talk about these things. Why don't we just recognise that everything in our society, everything in our civilization is based on Judeo-Christian values. It is the essential underpinning of everything that we are. Doesn't mean we're not tolerant of other religions and other people. We are. We always have been. We've always been the most tolerant country on earth. But isn't it about time we re-establish the primacy of who we are and what we stand for? And I will not have, I'm going to fight very hard on this. Education is the key in many ways. We are poisoning the minds of our kids from primary school, through secondary school, through university. We're teaching them that somehow we are a uniquely bad country because we indulged in slavery. As if we're the only country that ever did in the history of mankind. Are we teaching our kids that the Royal Naval Squadron spent 40 years, but loss of thousands of lives, driving slavery out across the world? Are we teaching them those things? Are we hell? We're telling 8-year-old white boys they're oppressors. 8-year-old black boys, they're victims. Is this the way for us to proceed as a country? To divide us up on the basis of race, sexual preference? Folks, I put it to you, this is a social disaster. Martin Luther King, who probably gave the most emotive and powerful speech of the 20th century that any of us can think of. Remember, I Have a Dream? That favourite speech? But people forget what he said. He said, I have a dream that one day my 4 children will be judged not by the colour of their skin, but with the content of their character. And I've had enough of diversity and inclusion, enough of quotas, enough of people being appointed to jobs because of certain skin colour or sexual preference. If we're going to have a united, genuinely united kingdom, let's get back to first principles, where we treat everybody the same, regardless of who they are, provided they obey the law and behave properly. Let's have a society that is genuinely fair and equal and end this madness that we're seeing and this poison that is being taught to our kids. And if I say these things to you with great passion, I mean them with great passion. I care about our culture. I care about our identity. I think what our forebears built. Look at us on the map. This tiny little island on the map. Look at what we've been able to achieve over these centuries. I want our kids to be proud of who we are, optimistic about our future. And I will never bow down to wokery, political correctness, criticism of any kind at all. I'm determined that we fight for British values. I'm determined that we fight for the benefits of Brexit. I believe you are not a country unless you control your own borders and you decide yourselves who comes and who does not. And for me to have come out, just past my, well, not come out in that way, obviously, but each to their own, that's fine. But for me to have come out of retirement, given up a great job that I had at GB News to do this, you need to understand I'm doing it with mission. I'm doing it with passion. I believe our country's in decline. I believe the Western world is in decline. I believe what those D-Day heroes and all those that back them up did is directly under threat. I'm worried about it. I'm scared for our future. I'm prepared to stand up and fight for it. I don't care who disagrees. I don't care who dislikes it. If those of you in this room agree with me, help me. If you don't agree with me, you can call me whatever you like. Just don't throw cement or milkshakes at me. Because that wouldn't be right, and nor would I. And I met the Labour candidate today. In Frinton High Street, there was the Labour candidate. Do you know what? We're miles apart on policy. But Richard, he was very civil, wasn't he?
He was very civil.
He was very civil. We shook hands. We had a good debate. We agreed, we disagree. That's the country I want to live in. I've had enough of cancel culture. Enough of J.K. Rowling being branded to be the devil. And that's what I'll fight for. Now look, I have disadvantages as a candidate, of course. I don't have the local knowledge and link that an MP ultimately needs. But I am backed up by some jolly good local councillors who know that ground. My advantage, I believe, is that as a national figure, I might just be able, no false promises, but I might just be able to put a constituency that is viewed to be a terminus, the end of the line, a bit ignored, and certainly in Clacton and Jaywick, many people do feel like that. I might just be able to put it on the map, to bring more tourists, and hopefully to bring some fresh investment. There are some very good engineering companies in this constituency already. We just need more of them, more well-paid jobs. And I would also say this to all of you, regardless of your wealth status. The other big thing that I'm campaigning for, and I will be unveiling the UKIP Brexit Party reform. I'll be unveiling the reform, well, I won't call it manifesto on Monday, because the word association with manifesto is normally lie. So I won't do that, but I'll be unveiling our contract on Monday morning in Merthyr Tydfil in South Wales, just to say to people, if this is what Labour are like, governing Wales, which is a complete Horlicks, the whole thing, what are they going to be like governing the country? But the one really big thing that I'm going to push on Monday is this. We want to raise the level at which people start paying tax to £20,000 a year. Let's take below paid out of tax. This would take 7 million people out of tax. It would take many pensioners who've got small private incomes that are supplementing the state pension out of tax, out of the need to go and use accountants. Any accountants in the room, bad luck, I'm really bad news for you. But most important of all, we cannot go on with the working population working more hours than they've ever worked, paying higher taxes than they've ever paid, living with more regulation than has ever been seen before, to pay for too many people who frankly choose not to work. I mean, can you believe it? You can now have an online consultation to say you're suffering from depression, get put on the sick, and have no obligation to even ever go and apply for a job. Is that helping our young people? No, it's a disaster, isn't it? It's a psychological disaster. We're actually encouraging, through government policy, this to happen. And for those who are on benefit, say you're 30, with a couple of kids, you're on benefit, but you want to do better and get on. You go to work, you work for more than 16 hours a week, your benefits get cut, you're better off being unemployed. It's madness, folks. It's complete and utter madness. But it's Treasury orthodoxy. Labour and Conservative have nothing to say on this at all. They both have the same policy. So we have to encourage those on benefits and out of work to go to work. And this £20,000 threshold does it. And for those that still won't respond to the incentive, we'll have to find tougher things and tougher ways to make it happen. Society has to be fair. Society has to be equal in the sense that those that pay their taxes feel they're getting a fair deal for their money. And right now, I mean self-employed people particularly, sole traders particularly, who feel they're being put upon by central government to pay for a group of people who don't, like them, get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go to work. Above all, I would say this to you, I'm unashamedly patriotic. I'm not scared of being that. It's not jingoistic, it's not sentimental, it's what I believe to be right. I think family, community and country are the cores and the backbones, underpinned by Christian culture, of the way that I was brought up the way that I believe to be right, and the way that I believe is worth us standing up and fighting for. In the European Parliament, I led a group for 15 years. I used to get up and give these big speeches when foreign heads of state visited. I always felt my contributions there were very constructive. Others took a different view. But I'm not scared of doing this. This is a massive commitment. This probably what I've decided here is effectively the end of my working life. But I want to do it because I want to leave a legacy. I want to do it because money is not my God. I want to do it because I believe in my country. I want to do it for my 4 children. Oh, and for my first grandchild, who's going to be born next Wednesday. At least that's the due date. So if you think I'm a little bit emotional, if you think I'm a little bit impassioned, if you think I perhaps go for things in a way that others don't, you've got me on all 3 scores. That is who I am. I'm a fighter, I'm a warrior. I'm not everybody's cup of tea. But I do what I do out of what I believe in the core of my soul. And I offer myself to you in a few weeks' time here in this beautiful part of the world. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I almost feel as if